When my brother-in-law Derek squeezed my shoulder in the hospital corridor and said, "You can trust me with anything," I believed him. That was my first mistake. I met Derek the same week I married his brother Marcus. He was the charming one, the guy who showed up to family dinners with flowers for my mother-in-law and jokes that made everyone forget their troubles. Marcus was quieter, steadier, the kind of man who fixed things without being asked. I fell in love with Marcus because he made me feel safe. Derek made everyone feel seen. For the first 3 years of our marriage, Derek was just my brother-in-law. He lived 2 towns over, worked in sales, and visited on holidays. We'd exchange pleasantries, share the occasional laugh over Thanksgiving turkey, nothing more. But when Marcus got the promotion that required him to travel for weeks at a time, everything shifted. I remember the first time Derek stopped by unannounced. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late September, and I was folding laundry in the living room when I heard the knock. Through the window, I saw his silver sedan in the driveway, and my stomach did a small flip, not from attraction, but from surprise. We weren't close enough for drop-in visits. "Hey, just wanted to check on you," he said when I opened the door, holding a bag of groceries. "Marcus mentioned you've been stressed with him gone so much. Thought I'd bring some things." Inside the bag were my favorite snacks, things I'd mentioned once, maybe twice, at family gatherings. The gesture felt thoughtful, kind. I invited him in for coffee, and we talked for an hour about work, about Marcus's travel schedule, about how lonely the house felt at night. "You don't have to handle everything alone," Derek said as he left. "I'm here if you need anything," and I believed him. The visits became regular after that. Once a week, then twice. He'd stop by to mow the lawn or fix the leaky faucet Marcus kept promising to handle when he got back. We'd talk over coffee, and slowly I started sharing more. I told him about my mother's battle with dementia, how I was driving 3 hours every weekend to check on her. I told him about the miscarriage I'd had the year before, the one Marcus and I didn't talk about anymore because the grief sat too heavy between us. Derek listened in a way that made me feel heard. He didn't offer empty platitudes or try to fix things. He just sat there nodding, his eyes full of what looked like genuine compassion. "You're stronger than you think," he said one afternoon, his voice low and steady. "Marcus is lucky to have you. I should have seen it then. The way his compliments felt just a little too intimate. The way his hand lingered on my arm when he said goodbye. But I was lonely, and loneliness makes you blind to red flags. The day everything started to unravel was a Thursday in November. Marcus had been gone for 2 weeks, and I'd gotten a call from my mother's care facility. She'd had a fall, nothing serious, but they wanted me to come sign some paperwork and discuss her medication. I was in the kitchen staring at my phone, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on my chest when Derek texted, "Coffee today? You look like you could use a break." I hadn't told him about my mother's fall yet, but somehow he knew I was struggling. That felt comforting at the time. Now I wonder if he was always watching, always waiting for the right moment. He showed up an hour later with pastries and that easy smile. We sat at my kitchen table and I told him everything. How my mother didn't recognize me anymore. How Marcus was so wrapped up in his career that he barely called. How I felt like I was disappearing under the weight of everyone else's needs. "I don't know how much more I can take," I said. And my voice cracked. Derek reached across the table and covered my hand with his. "You don't have to carry this alone. Let me help, and God help me." I let him. Over the next few weeks, Derek became my confidant. He drove me to visit my mother twice when I was too exhausted to make the trip alone. He listened when I vented about Marcus's emotional distance. He was there, present, in a way my husband hadn't been in months. I told him things I'd never told anyone. About the credit card debt I'd hidden from Marcus because I was ashamed. About the job opportunity I'd turned down years ago because Marcus wanted me closer to home. About the nights I lay awake wondering if I'd made a mistake marrying into this family. "You deserve better," Derek said one evening as we sat on my back porch watching the sun set. His voice was soft, almost hypnotic. "You deserve someone who sees you." I should have stopped him there. I should have stood up, thanked him for his help, and set a boundary. But I didn't. Because at that moment, the feeling felt like oxygen, and I'd been holding my breath for so long. The shift happened so gradually, I didn't notice it at first. Derek's visits became longer, his texts more frequent. He'd send me messages late at night. Nothing inappropriate, just check-ins. "Can't sleep either? Want to talk?" And I'd respond, because talking to him felt easier than lying in the dark with my thoughts. Marcus came home for Thanksgiving that year, but it felt like he brought his work with him. He was on his laptop during dinner, checking emails between bites of turkey. When I tried to talk to him about my mother, he nodded absently and said, "We'll figure it out," before returning to his screen. Derek was there too, of course. He sat across from me at the table, and when Marcus excused himself to take a call, Derek caught my eye and gave me this look, sympathetic, knowing. Like we shared a secret language Marcus couldn't speak. After dinner, I was washing dishes when Derek came into the kitchen. He picked up a towel and started drying without being asked. "He doesn't appreciate you," Derek said quietly. So quietly, I almost didn't hear him over the running water. "He's just stressed with work," I said, though I didn't believe it anymore. Derek set down the plate he was drying and turned to face me. "You make excuses for him, but when's the last time he asked how you're doing?" "Really asked?" I couldn't answer that, because the truth was, I couldn't remember. "You deserve someone who puts you first," Derek said, and this time when he touched my arm, his hand stayed there. "Someone who sees what I see." I pulled away gently, uncomfortable with where this was heading. "Derek, I'm married to your brother." "I know," he said, holding up his hands in surrender. "I'm just saying you deserve better treatment. That's all. But that wasn't all. I could feel it in the air between us, thick and dangerous. I made an excuse about being tired and left him standing in the kitchen. That night, lying in bed next to Marcus while he scrolled through his phone, I felt a gnawing guilt I couldn't name. I hadn't done anything wrong, but something felt wrong. I'd let Derek get too close, shared too much, created an intimacy that had no place in my marriage. I decided then that I needed to pull back, create some distance, but Derek had other plans. 2 weeks later, Marcus left for another business trip, this one 3 weeks long. The night before he left, we had our worst fight yet. He'd forgotten about my mother's birthday and hadn't even asked how she was doing. When I brought it up, he snapped, "I can't be everything to everyone, okay? I'm trying to provide for this family." "What family?" I shot back. "We're never together. You're never here." He grabbed his suitcase and walked out without another word. No apology. No goodbye kiss. Just the sound of the front door closing and his car pulling out of the driveway. I stood in the empty house, shaking with anger and hurt, and without thinking, I texted Derek. "Can you come over? I need someone to talk to." He was there in 20 minutes. We sat on the couch and I told him everything. The fight, the loneliness, the feeling that my marriage was crumbling and I didn't know how to stop it. Derek listened like he always did, nodding in all the right places. "You know what I think?" he said when I finally ran out of words. "I think Marcus doesn't know what he has. And I think you're scared to admit you might be happier without him." The words hit me like cold water. "Derek, don't. I'm just being honest." He shifted closer, his knee touching mine. "You've spent months telling me how unhappy you are. At some point, you have to ask yourself what you're holding on to." "He's your brother," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "And you're a woman who deserves to be loved the way you love others." Derek's hand found mine, and this time I didn't pull away. "I see you in a way he never will." For one dangerous moment, I let myself imagine it. What it would feel like to be chosen, to be prioritized, to matter to someone. But then reality crashed in. The ring on my finger, the vows I'd made, the line I was about to cross. I stood up abruptly. "You should go." Derek didn't argue. He stood, gave me one last long look, and left. But the damage was done. The confession hung in the air, and I knew things could never go back to what they were. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I'd set a boundary and he'd respect it. I was wrong. 3 days later, I got a text from Marcus's mother, Linda. "We need to talk. Come to the house tomorrow." My stomach dropped. Linda never texted me. We had a polite but distant relationship. She was warm to my face, but I always sensed she thought Marcus could have done better. Getting a direct summons from her sent a chill down my spine. I showed up the next afternoon, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white. Linda opened the door before I could knock, her face tight with something I couldn't read. "Come in," she said, her voice clipped. Inside, I found not just Linda, but Marcus's sister, Rachel, and his aunt, Diane. They sat in the living room like a tribunal, their faces somber. My pulse quickened. "Sit down," Linda said, gesturing to the chair across from them. I sat, feeling like a child called to the principal's office. Linda folded her hands in her lap and looked at me with eyes that had turned cold. Derek came to see me yesterday. He's very concerned about you. My heart stopped. Concerned? He told us you've been confiding in him. About your marriage. About Marcus. She paused, letting the words sink in. He said you've been having inappropriate conversations. That you've expressed regrets about marrying into this family. The room tilted. What? No, that's not... He said you told him you made a mistake marrying Marcus, Rachel cut in, her voice sharp. That you've been unhappy for years but stayed out of obligation. The words felt like a physical blow. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. My brain scrambled to process what was happening. Derek had gone to Marcus's family. He'd twisted everything I'd told him in confidence, stripped away the context, and presented me as the villain in a story I didn't recognize. That's not what I said. I finally managed, my voice shaking. I was venting. I was struggling. Derek offered to listen, and You what? Linda interrupted, her tone sharp as glass. You complained about my son to his brother. You shared intimate details of your marriage with someone outside of it? I was lonely, I said, and I hated how weak my voice sounded. Marcus was gone all the time, and Derek was just there, being supportive. Supportive? Diane leaned forward, her eyes narrowed. Derek said you'd been growing closer, that there was an emotional affair happening. The words hit me like a slap. No, absolutely not. Nothing happened between us. Nothing. But you wanted it to, Rachel said, and the accusation in her voice made my stomach turn. Derek said you didn't pull away when he expressed feelings for you, that you let him believe there could be something more. I felt the walls closing in. Every conversation, every coffee, every moment of vulnerability I'd shared with Derek was being weaponized against me. He'd taken my pain and repackaged it as evidence of my unfaithfulness, my disloyalty, my unworthiness. He's lying, I said, my voice stronger now, anger cutting through the shock. I did pull away. I told him to leave. I set a boundary the moment he crossed a line. Linda's expression didn't soften. Derek has no reason to lie. He came to us because he's worried about his brother. Because he thinks Marcus deserves to know the truth about who he married. The truth? I stood up, my hands trembling. The truth is that your son has been emotionally absent for months. The truth is I've been taking care of my mother alone, handling everything alone, while he prioritizes work over our marriage. And when I needed someone to talk to, Derek manipulated that vulnerability. So it's Marcus's fault you turned to another man? Rachel's voice dripped with disdain. I didn't turn to anyone, I said, my voice breaking. I talked to my family. I trusted the wrong person. Linda stood, signaling the conversation was over. Derek said you'd deny it, that you'd try to make him look like the bad guy. She walked to the door and opened it. I think you should leave. And I think you should prepare yourself for a difficult conversation when Marcus gets home. I walked out of that house in a daze, my legs moving on autopilot to my car. I sat in the driver's seat for 10 minutes before I could even turn the key, my mind racing through every interaction with Derek, trying to understand how it had come to this. He'd played me. From the very beginning, he'd played me. The kindness, the listening, the shoulder to cry on, it had all been strategic. He'd gotten close, earned my trust, extracted my secrets, and then used them to destroy me in the eyes of his family. But why? I called Marcus that night, my hands shaking as I held the phone. He answered on the third ring, his voice distracted. Hey, can this be quick? I'm about to head into a meeting. Your mother called me to the house today, I said, skipping any preamble. Derek told her things, about us, about our marriage. There was a long pause. What things? He twisted everything, Marcus. He made it sound like I was having an emotional affair with him. Like I regretted marrying you. Another pause, longer this time. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was different, cold, guarded. Were you? The question gutted me. Was I what? Having an emotional affair with my brother. I couldn't breathe. How can you even ask me that? Because apparently you've been spending a lot of time with him, confiding in him, sharing things about our marriage that should stay between us. He was helping me, Marcus. Or I thought he was. I was struggling and you weren't here and he offered support. But my voice cracked. I never crossed a line, he did. And now he's lying to your family to cover it up. My mother said you didn't deny the conversations happened. Because they did happen. I was shouting now, tears streaming down my face. I talked to him. I vented. I made the mistake of trusting him with my feelings. But I didn't cheat on you. I didn't want him. I wanted my husband to be present. Marcus was quiet for so long I thought he'd hung up. Finally, he said, I need to think about this. I'll be home in a few days. Marcus... The line went dead. I sat on my kitchen floor and cried until I had nothing left. Then I got up, washed my face, and made a decision. I wasn't going to let Derek destroy me without a fight. The next morning, I drove to Derek's apartment. He answered the door in sweatpants and a t-shirt, his hair messy, a coffee mug in his hand. When he saw me, his expression shifted, surprised, then cautious. Can I come in? I asked, my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest. He hesitated, then stepped aside. His apartment was neat, impersonal, like a hotel room. I stood in the center of his living room and turned to face him. Why? I asked simply. He set down his coffee mug and crossed his arms. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Why did you go to your family? Why did you twist everything I told you and make me look like the villain? Derek's expression hardened. I didn't twist anything. I told them the truth. The truth? I laughed, a bitter sound. You told them I was having an emotional affair with you. That I regretted my marriage. That I was unhappy with Marcus, weren't you? He stepped closer, his voice dropping. Everything I told them came from your mouth. You're the one who complained about Marcus for months. You're the one who let me get close. Don't blame me for caring about you. Caring? The word came out like venom. You manipulated me. You saw someone vulnerable and you exploited it. And when I set a boundary, you retaliated by trying to destroy my reputation. Derek's jaw tightened. I protected my brother. He deserves to know who he's married to. And who is that? I stepped closer, refusing to back down. A woman who made the mistake of trusting her brother-in-law? A woman who was struggling and needed support? What exactly did I do that was so terrible? You emotionally cheated, Derek said flatly. Whether you want to admit it or not, you formed an inappropriate attachment to me. And Marcus has a right to know. I stared at him, searching his face for any sign of the man I'd thought I knew. There was nothing there but cold calculation. You're lying to yourself, I said quietly. This was never about protecting Marcus. This was about you, about what you wanted and couldn't have. Something flickered in his eyes. Anger, maybe, or shame. You think pretty highly of yourself. I think you saw an opportunity, I continued, my voice gaining strength. You saw your brother's wife feeling lonely and neglected, and you saw a chance. You inserted yourself into my life, made yourself indispensable, and when I didn't fall into your arms the way you hoped, you decided to burn everything down. Derek's laugh was harsh. You're delusional. I was a good brother-in-law. You're the one who made it weird. Then why lie? I challenged myself. If I made it weird, why not tell your family the truth? That you confessed feelings for me and I rejected you? That I asked you to leave? His silence was answer enough. Because that version makes you look bad, I said, finishing the thought for him. That version makes you the one who crossed the line. So instead, you went to your family first and spun the story your way. You knew once they heard your version, they'd never fully believe mine. Derek's expression turned mean. Believe what you want. But at the end of the day, you're the one who shares things you shouldn't have. You're the one who let me get close. And now you have to live with the consequences. I left his apartment with my hands shaking, but my resolve hardened. He was right about one thing: I had shared too much. I had let him get too close. But I refused to be the only one who paid the price for his manipulation. When Marcus came home 3 days later, the house felt like a minefield. He set his suitcase down in the entryway and looked at me like I was a stranger. We need to talk, he said. We sat at opposite ends of the couch, the same couch where Derek and I had talked so many times. The irony wasn't lost on me. My family thinks you've been having an affair with Derek, Marcus said, his voice carefully neutral. I haven't, I said firmly, but I did make a mistake. I confided in him about our marriage, about how lonely I've been, about things that should have stayed between us. Marcus's jaw tightened. Why him? Why not me? Because you weren't here, I said, and the words came out sharper than I intended. Not physically, not emotionally. You were so consumed with work that I felt invisible. And when Derek offered to listen, I took it because I was desperate for someone to see me. So this is my fault? No, I said, meeting his eyes. It's my fault for not demanding what I needed from you directly, for letting someone else fill a space that should have been yours. But Marcus Derek manipulated the situation. He got close to me on purpose, listened to my struggles, and then used everything I said to make me look unfaithful. Marcus leaned back, running his hands through his hair. He said you didn't pull away when he told you he had feelings for you. That's a lie. I told him to leave immediately. I set a clear boundary. My voice trembled with frustration. He's rewriting what happened because I rejected him. This is revenge. My mother doesn't think Derek would lie about something like this. Your mother has always liked Derek more than me, I said quietly. You know that. Marcus didn't deny it. We sat in heavy silence for a long moment. Did you have feelings for him? Marcus finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The question hung between us, loaded and dangerous. I thought about lying, about saying no without hesitation. But our marriage was already built on too many half-truths and silences. I felt seen by him, I admitted. When you were gone, when I was struggling, he made me feel like I mattered. But I never wanted him romantically. I never wanted to leave you. I wanted you to be the person who made me feel that way. Marcus's eyes were wet when he looked at me. I've been a terrible husband. You've been absent, I corrected gently. And I should have told you how bad it had gotten instead of turning to Derek. What do we do now? Marcus asked. I need you to believe me, I said. I need you to trust that I'm telling you the truth about what happened. And then I need us to figure out how to repair this. Not just what happened with Derek, but what's been broken between us for months. Marcus nodded slowly. I believe you. But your family has already made up their minds about me, I said. Derek got to them first, and they trust him more than they trust me. So we need proof. Proof of what? That Derek is lying. Over the next week, I became someone I didn't recognize. I went through my phone, screenshotting every text conversation Derek and I had ever had. I made a timeline of events, documenting when he'd visited, what we'd discussed, the exact words he'd said when he crossed the line. I was methodical, precise, treating my own life like a legal case I needed to win. Marcus helped, though I could see the discomfort in his eyes as he read through messages between his wife and his brother. Some of the texts were innocent. Derek asking if I needed anything from the store, me thanking him for fixing the fence. Others were more intimate. Late-night conversations about loneliness, about feeling unseen, about struggling to keep going. I can see how it looks, Marcus said one night, staring at his laptop screen. If someone only saw these messages without context. That's exactly what Derek counted on, I said. He knew the conversations would look suspicious out of context. He built the evidence he needed while pretending to be supportive, but it wasn't enough. Text messages proved we'd talked, but they didn't prove Derek had lied to his family. We needed something more. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Marcus's sister Rachel called me 2 weeks after the confrontation at Linda's house. Her voice was tentative, uncertain. Can you meet me for coffee? She asked. Alone. I almost said no. Rachel had been one of the harshest voices in that living room, her accusations cutting deeper than Linda's cold disappointment. But something in her tone, a hesitation, maybe even doubt, made me agree. We met at a small cafe on the edge of town, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and local art on the walls. Rachel was already there when I arrived, stirring a cappuccino she clearly hadn't touched. She looked tired, older than she had just 2 weeks ago. Thanks for coming, she said as I sat down. I ordered a tea I didn't want and waited. Rachel had called this meeting. I wasn't going to make it easier for her. She took a breath, her fingers tapping against her mug. Derek came by my house last night. My stomach clenched. What did he want? He wanted to know if Marcus had contacted me. If I knew what you two were planning. She finally looked up at me. He seemed nervous, like he was trying to control the narrative. He's been controlling the narrative from the beginning, I said quietly. Rachel nodded slowly. I've been thinking about everything that happened. About what Derek said, about how he said it. And some things aren't adding up. I leaned forward, hope sparking in my chest. What things? He told us you'd been having inappropriate conversations for months. that you'd grown emotionally dependent on him. But when I asked him for specifics, exact dates, exact words, he got vague. He kept saying he didn't want to betray your confidence, that he was only telling us because he was worried about Marcus. Rachel's eyes met mine. But if he was really worried about Marcus, why did he wait so long to say something? Why not tell us when it was supposedly happening? Because it wasn't happening the way he said, I replied. He twisted conversations that were happening in real time. He couldn't give you dates because there was no affair to document. Rachel was quiet for a moment. There's something else. Derek mentioned that you'd told him about the credit card debt. The debt Marcus didn't know about. My blood went cold. I had told Derek about that, in confidence, during one of our late-night conversations when I was drowning in guilt. It was one of my deepest shames, something I'd hidden from Marcus because I was terrified of disappointing him. How would Derek know to tell us that specific detail unless you'd really opened up to him? Rachel continued. It was the thing that made Mom believe him completely. She said no one shares financial secrets unless there's real intimacy. I felt sick. I did share that with him, but not because there was anything romantic between us. I shared it because I was ashamed and scared, and he presented himself as someone safe to talk to. I know, Rachel said softly, because I've been thinking about my own conversations with Derek over the years, and I realized he does this. He gets close to people, learns their secrets, makes them feel special. Then he uses what he knows, and what do you mean? Rachel's expression darkened. 5 years ago, I was going through a divorce. Derek was incredibly supportive, called me every day, took me out for dinner, listened to me cry about my ex-husband. I told him things I never told anyone else. And then, during a family argument about something completely unrelated, Derek casually mentioned one of those private details in front of everyone. He framed it like he was concerned about me, but really he was embarrassing me. Making me look unstable. Why would he do that? Because I'd started dating someone he didn't approve of, Rachel said. Someone who took my attention away from him. Derek doesn't like it when people he's invested in move on. The pieces clicked into place. Derek hadn't just manipulated me. This was a pattern. He collected people, gained their trust, and then weaponized their vulnerabilities when they no longer served his purpose. Did you tell your mother this? I asked. Rachel shook her head. Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first, to see if I was reading this right. She reached across the table and touched my hand. I'm sorry for how I treated you at Mom's house, for believing in him without question. Relief flooded through me, so intense I felt tears prick my eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Rachel said. Mom is going to be harder to convince. She's always had a soft spot for Derek, and Aunt Diane will follow whatever Mom believes. What about Marcus? Marcus is your best shot at getting through to them, Rachel said. If he stands by you, if he publicly supports you, it'll make them question Derek's version more. Marcus did stand by me. That night, he called his mother and told her we needed a family meeting, all of us, including Derek. Linda tried to refuse, saying she didn't want more drama, but Marcus was firm in a way I'd never heard him be with his mother. This is happening, he said. Either at your house or at ours. Your choice. We met at Linda's house on a Saturday afternoon. The living room felt different this time. I wasn't walking in as the accused, but as someone with her own story to tell. Marcus sat beside me, his hand in mine, solid and present in a way he hadn't been in months. Derek arrived last, and I watched his face carefully as he entered. When he saw Rachel sitting near me instead of near Linda, something shifted in his expression. Calculation. He knew something had changed. Linda folded her hands in her lap, her face stern. Marcus said this was important. So let's hear it. Marcus squeezed my hand, then stood. I asked everyone here because there's been a misunderstanding. Derek told you that my wife was having an emotional affair with him, that she'd been inappropriate, that she'd expressed regret about our marriage. But after talking with her, reviewing their conversations and thinking about the timeline of events, I believe Derek has misrepresented what happened. Derek leaned forward. Marcus, I know this is hard to hear, but I'm not finished, Marcus said, his voice sharp. Derek fell silent. What actually happened is that my wife was struggling. I was gone for work constantly. She was dealing with her mother's health issues alone, and she needed support. Derek offered that support, and she trusted him. But then Derek developed feelings for her, confessed those feelings, and when she rejected him, He went to this family and twisted their entire relationship to make himself look like the concerned brother and her look like the unfaithful wife. Linda's mouth opened. Derek, is this true? Derek's face remained calm, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. Marcus, you're being manipulated. She's convinced you to take her side, but… Answer the question, Rachel cut in, her voice cold. Did you confess feelings for her? Derek's eyes darted to Rachel, surprised by her tone. I may have said some things that could be interpreted that way, but I was trying to show her what real support looks like. What she deserved. It wasn't romantic. It was concerning. That's not what you told me, I said, my voice steady. You said Marcus didn't appreciate me, that I deserved someone who saw me the way you did. You touched my hand, moved closer, and when I told you to leave, you looked at me like I'd betrayed you. That's your interpretation, Derek said dismissively. I was being compassionate, and you read into it. Marcus pulled out his phone. Then explain this. He turned the screen toward the room. On it was a text message thread, not between Derek and me, but between Derek and someone else. My breath caught when I saw the contact name, Josh. Who's Josh? Linda asked. My coworker, Marcus said. We've been friends since college. Josh called me 3 days ago and told me something interesting. Derek had reached out to him a month ago, asking questions about me. About our marriage. About whether I seemed happy, Derek's expression flickered. I was concerned about you. You're my brother. You asked Josh if I'd ever mentioned problems in my marriage. Marcus continued, reading from his phone. You asked if I'd talked about my wife being unhappy. You were fishing for information before you even got close to her. He looked up at Derek. You were building a case. The room went silent. I watched Linda's face and saw the doubt creeping in. That doesn't prove anything, Derek said, but his voice had lost its confidence. I was worried about Marcus. I wanted to know if there were problems I could help with. By seducing his wife? Rachel's voice was sharp. Because that's what you tried to do, isn't it? You saw an opening, someone vulnerable, and you thought you could step in. Play the hero. And when it didn't work, you decided to destroy her reputation so no one would believe her version. That's not… Derek started. You did the same thing to me, Rachel said, standing. 5 years ago, when I was going through my divorce. You got close, learned my secrets, and then used them against me in front of the family when I started dating someone you didn't like. Linda's head snapped toward Rachel. What? Derek told everyone about my financial problems during that Christmas dinner, Rachel said. Remember? He framed it as a concern and said he was worried I was making poor decisions. But really, he was punishing me for not needing him anymore. Diane shifted uncomfortably. Rachel, that's a serious accusation. It's the truth, Rachel said firmly. I've spent 5 years thinking I was being oversensitive. But hearing what he did to her, she gestured to me, I realized this is who Derek is. He collects broken people, gets close to them, and then uses their pain as leverage. Derek stood abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. You're all turning on me because she, he pointed at me, has convinced you I'm some kind of villain. But I was trying to help. I was trying to be there for people who needed support. No, I said, standing to face him. You were trying to be needed. There's a difference. You didn't help me because you cared about me. You helped me so I'd owe you. So I'd feel indebted. And when I didn't give you what you wanted, you tried to take everything from me. Derek's mask finally cracked. Anger flashed across his face, raw and ugly. You led me on. You sat with me for hours, told me your deepest secrets, let me into your life. What was I supposed to think? That I was your brother's wife, Marcus said, his voice low and dangerous. That's what you were supposed to think. Linda stood slowly, her face pale. Derek, I need you to leave. Mom, leave, she repeated, her voice trembling. I need time to think about all of this. Derek looked around the room, searching for an ally. When he found none, his expression hardened into something cold and bitter. Fine, but don't come crying to me when this all falls apart. When she does to Marcus what she almost did to him with me. He walked out, slamming the door behind him. The silence he left was heavy, oppressive. Linda sank back into her chair and covered her face with her hands. I believed him. I believed every word. He's very convincing, I said quietly. That's what made it so easy for him to manipulate me too. Linda looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine remorse in her eyes. I'm sorry. I should have listened to your side before passing judgment. I should have trusted that Marcus knew his own wife. I made mistakes too, I admitted. I should have come to you, to Marcus, instead of confiding in Derek. I should have been stronger. You were surviving, Rachel said softly. That's not a weakness. Marcus pulled me close, and I leaned into him, feeling the weight of the past weeks finally begin to lift. But the aftermath wasn't simple. Derek's manipulation had done real damage, not just to my reputation, but to the family dynamics. Linda struggled with guilt, replaying every conversation she'd had with Derek, questioning what else he might have lied about. Aunt Diane stopped coming to family dinners, uncomfortable with the conflict. And Derek himself disappeared, blocked all of our numbers, moved to a different town, cut himself off entirely. Part of me felt sorry for him. Not because I believed he deserved forgiveness, but because I understood now that his behavior came from something broken inside him. Some desperate need for control, for importance that he filled by collecting other people's pain. But mostly I focused on healing. Marcus cut back his travel. Not completely. We still needed the income. But he set boundaries with his work that he'd never set before. He started asking me how I was doing, really asking, and waiting for real answers. We went to counseling together, working through the distance that had grown between us long before Derek entered the picture. I learned to speak up about my needs instead of suffering in silence. To say when I felt lonely, when I needed support, when something wasn't working. It felt awkward at first, exposing my vulnerabilities so directly. But Marcus met me there, showing up in ways he hadn't before. My mother's condition worsened that winter, and when she passed in February, Marcus was there. He held my hand at the funeral, stayed up with me on the nights I couldn't sleep, helped me sort through decades of belongings without complaint. He showed me, in 100 small ways, that he was choosing me. 6 months after that family meeting, I was cleaning out the garage when I found an old photo album. It was from our wedding, images of Marcus and me looking impossibly young, surrounded by family. There was Derek in several photos, smiling that easy smile, his arm around Marcus's shoulder. I stared at that photo for a long time, trying to reconcile the man I'd trusted with the man who'd tried to destroy me. The truth was they were the same person. Derek had always been capable of both kindness and cruelty. I just hadn't seen the second part until it was too late. Marcus found me sitting on the garage floor, the album open in my lap. "You okay?" he asked, sitting down beside me. "Just thinking," I said, about how different things could have been. Different how? If I'd come to you first when I was struggling, if I'd demanded that you be present instead of accepting your absence, if I'd never trusted Derek at all. I closed the album. So many small choices that led to something so big. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I've thought about that too. About how I created the space for Derek to step in. I wasn't there for you and someone else was. That's on me. It's on both of us," I said. We let our marriage deteriorate. We stopped communicating. We took each other for granted. "But we're fixing it now," Marcus said, taking my hand. "That has to count for something. It did count. Every day, it counted." Rachel and I grew closer in the aftermath. She became the sister I'd never had. Someone who understood the specific pain of being manipulated by Derek. We'd meet for coffee every few weeks. And sometimes we'd talk about him, trying to understand what had driven him, what we'd missed. But mostly we talked about other things. About healing, about moving forward, about building lives that weren't defined by what he'd done to us. Linda took longer to come around. The guilt of having sided with Derek ate at her, made her distant and uncertain around me. But slowly, through family dinners and holidays, through Marcus's gentle insistence that we move past it, she softened. One afternoon, she showed up at my door with flowers and tears in her eyes. "I failed you," she said simply. I chose to believe Derek because it was easier than questioning my own judgment of him. "I'm sorry." We stood on my porch, and I saw how much courage it had taken her to come. Linda wasn't someone who apologized easily or admitted mistakes. But she was here, trying. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. The hardest part wasn't the dramatic confrontation or the family meeting. It was the quiet moments after, when I had to sit with my own choices. The nights I lay awake replaying conversations with Derek, wondering what I could have done differently. The guilt of knowing I'd shared intimate details of my marriage with someone outside of it, regardless of his intentions. The shame of having been so desperate for connection that I'd missed all the warning signs. My therapist told me that self-blame was part of the healing process, but that I needed to be careful not to let it consume me. "You were vulnerable," she said during one session, "and someone exploited that vulnerability. You can acknowledge your mistakes without taking responsibility for his manipulation." It took time to internalize that, to separate my poor judgment from Derek's calculated cruelty, to understand that while I'd made mistakes, I hadn't deserved what he did. 1 year after everything happened, Marcus surprised me with a weekend trip. We drove to a cabin in the mountains, the kind of place with no cell service and nothing but trees and silence. On our second night there, we sat on the porch watching the stars, wrapped in blankets against the cool air. "I've been thinking about Derek," Marcus said, breaking the comfortable silence. I was tense. "We rarely talked about him anymore." "Not like that," Marcus clarified. "I mean, I've been thinking about what he taught us, about what we learned from all of it." "What did we learn?" I asked. "That we can't take each other for granted. That communication isn't optional in a marriage, it's essential. That we have to protect what we have, actively, every day." He turned to look at me. "I almost lost you. Not to Derek, but to my own negligence. And I'm grateful we got a second chance." "Me too," I whispered. "And I've been thinking about forgiveness," Marcus continued. "Not for Derek, I don't know if I'll ever forgive him. But for ourselves, for the mistakes we made that let things get so bad." I leaned my head on his shoulder. "I think that's what I'm still working on. Forgiving myself." "Then we'll work on it together," he said. "The truth about betrayal is that it doesn't end when the betrayer leaves. It lingers in the moments of doubt, in the hesitation before trusting someone new, in the scars that don't quite heal. Derek took something from me, a certain innocence maybe, or the belief that kindness always comes from a pure place. But he also gave me something, though he never intended to. He gave me clarity about what I needed. About the importance of boundaries, of speaking up, of not settling for scraps of attention when I deserved full presence. He showed me, in the most painful way possible, that I was stronger than I thought, that I could survive betrayal, face public judgment, and come out the other side still standing. And most importantly, he forced Marcus and me to rebuild our marriage on a foundation of honesty instead of convenience. We had to learn how to truly see each other, to prioritize each other, to choose each other actively instead of passively existing side by side. I never saw Derek again after that day at Linda's house. I heard through Rachel that he'd moved several states away, started over somewhere new. Part of me wondered if he'd learned anything, if he'd changed. But mostly, I hoped he'd find whatever healing he needed to stop hurting people. As for me, I learned to trust again, carefully with boundaries, but genuinely. I learned that asking for help wasn't a weakness, but that I needed to ask the right people. I learned that my marriage was worth fighting for, but only if both of us were willing to do the work. On our anniversary last month, Marcus gave me a card. Inside, he'd written, "Thank you for not giving up on us. Thank you for being brave enough to fight for what we have. I see you now, and I'll spend every day making sure you know it." I cried when I read it. Not from sadness, but from gratitude, because we'd survived something that could have destroyed us, and we'd chosen to use it to grow stronger instead. So if you're listening to this and you've ever trusted the wrong person, ever had your secrets used against you, ever felt the sting of betrayal from someone you thought was safe, I want you to know something. It wasn't your fault. You were human. You were vulnerable. You were looking for connection in a world that can feel terribly lonely. And someone took advantage of that, but you're still here. You're still standing. And that's strength, the strength it takes to survive betrayal and rebuild. That's something no one can take from you. Would you have trusted someone like Derek? Would you have seen the warning signs I missed? Tell me in the comments, because I think we all need to hear each other's stories. To know we're not alone in our pain or our healing. And if you're going through something similar right now, if someone has weaponized your trust, twisted your words, or used your secrets against you, hold on. The truth has a way of surfacing, even when it feels buried. Stand firm in what you know to be true. Find your people, the ones who will believe you and stand beside you. And remember that healing isn't linear, but it is possible. Thank you for listening to my story, for being here with me through all of it. I hope it helped you in some way, or at least reminded you that you're not alone.